Today we are aboard the new evil Wreckoning, and it's a big bike. It's got 166 millimeters in the rear, 170 in the front. Right off the bat, this thing is a pretty absurd little climber. It's got a nice steep seat angle, so I'm sitting pretty forward and upright. Feels pretty good coming off a smaller travel bike. Good way of managing all that travel is try to get you sitting forward between the wheels while you're climbing. But the real absurd part of this bike is the anti-squat they designed in the pedal platform. It's really something else, because this bike is super supple off the top. Requires almost no force to break that coil shock away, and yet you'd never know it when you're pedaling. It's pretty goofy just how good the pedal platform is, but then you hit a route while you're climbing and it just kind of dives deep into the travel right off the top. And the other weird thing is, usually bikes with this much anti-squat, you can kind of feel the chain force interacting with the shock, kind of pulling it apart. This bike feels real neutral in or out of the saddle, but yet doesn't feel like there's anything crazy going on underneath you. Just feels very subtle. But yet this bike actually absolutely like crushes out of the saddle. No bob. I think one of the more unique geo figures on this bike that you can really feel immediately is just how short the chainstays are on this big travel beast. It's got 430 chainstay, so for that amount of travel, it's quite short, and certainly makes this bike really nimble for how much travel it has. I did toss the seat all the way forward on this bike just to make sure I'm nice and forward between the wheels. And I've actually been riding this bike on the low setting, not the extra low flip chip setting. But yeah, it's absolutely absurd how good this thing pedals. And not just like you can get up the hill kind of good pedaling, but out of the saddle cross-country mode good pedaling. I mean, it's something special for sure. And the fact that you can't feel the anti-squat is also pretty incredible. It just feels so neutral. I mean, I've talked about bikes feeling neutral in the past, but how neutral this climbs out of the saddle is really something super special for having 160 mil of travel. And of course, with those short chainstays, manuals, wheelies are quite easy to pop up. And then that helps you get around tight switchbacks too. Super deluxe coil on the rear. The coil is like, both shocks really just have really open feeling damping. They're just really easy to get into the first 50 mils of travel on the front and the rear. It's just so supple right off the top. And then got the Code RC brakes, tons of power there. These are feeling really phenomenal on this bike. Plenty of power, and I'm a super, relatively heavy rider. I'm about 200 pounds, and they have almost a scary amount of stopping force. This bike's got some i9 wheels and hubs, so super quick engagement. A little bit loud when you get coasting, not necessarily my flavor, but definitely tells you how fast you're going. Let's get that hub buzz. This thing pedals so stupid good. Oh, she's eating roots up for sure. Brakes are insane. Whoa. Such a good mix between like very cornerable and whippable feeling, but very plush and kind of downhill bike feeling. Jesus, it's so fun to corner this thing. And that the front end is just waiting to be pulled up because those chainstays are nice and short. Yeah, it's real playful for a 170 29er. You just tuck this thing around. It actually is riding like a really little bike with impossibly supple suspension. That coil shock in the rear just like hops out of the way when you hit a root. It is so easy to get this bike into the first, whatever, 20-30% of the travel, but then super good mid-stroke support, which makes this bike feel like a smaller bike. Wow, it's so good in the freaking corners. Oh, I'm just like tucking this big bike around, but it feels so little. Woo! It's so weird, like, woo, the amount that I'm slapping this big bike around. You'd think the rear end would just be like shooting out at every corner, but somehow I still have tons of grip. This is definitely by far one of the most unique big bikes I've ridden. It is just like telepathic when you get to a corner, and then it's just got tons of travel. So you just want to like, kind of just want to beat it up. Like the rear end certainly does give a downhill bike like feel. It's got that kind of like, got that coil shock feel to it. Tight trees. Jeez, nice. Woo! So insane in the corners. But yet, very plush. Quite soft on the old wrists. At this speed, this trail is usually kind of brutal. Definitely not today. I also didn't expect it to feel so supportive under pedaling, which I've kind of already mentioned, but also under just going flat out. I mean, it's super plush off the top, but it just ramps right up. Woo-hoo! I'm looking forward to this corner. Woo! It's a little bit easier just to corner this bike. You don't need to do as much work. I'm actually kind of over cornering, and I don't need to lean quite so much on this bike, even though it's big. Another goofy thing about this Wreckoning is like how much pop you can generate on a 160 plus bike with a coil shock in the rear. Like I'm definitely able to just kind of maneuver this thing around, no problem. Gosh dang. And these codes are pretty absurd. It's got the 200 mil rotors and they lock up these wheels like no problem. The other thing is, like, for a long travel bike, this thing stays so poised. It's just like not too floppy. You can pump it through stuff so well. I suppose I'll hit the drop today since I have a bunch of suspension. Nothing crazy, but kind of a flat landing. Hardly felt it though, because I have all of the travel and all the wheels. Gosh, yeah. Pretty strange to have this much travel and not be afraid to just crank the pedals. Yeah, it's got like the suspension of a downhill bike, but really it's so much more nimble. So it's really not that great of an analogy for this bike because it is just so easy to change direction and squirt around on this thing. Good traction under braking. So who's this bike for? I'd say this bike is for somebody who's looking for a lot of travel, a very capable bike, but also something that isn't too cumbersome, so that they can still hit jumps and have style with. And also somebody who's looking to race that wants a long travel bike that's plenty agile. Looks like I ran out of trail today, but if you like the review, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. And for more content like this, head on over to freehubmag.com.